Good evening, everyone who have gathered here for this talk. As Dr. C.S. Venkatesan mentioned, this is a part of a series which we organize. We started it with the first conversation kind of talk we organized 2 months ago by Hugo Cardoso, and the second one in that series was by Anu Antony. She spoke on spiritual labor. This is actually the third one. This interesting, it touches an interesting aspect of Kerala's history, which is largely unmentioned, largely untouched by the scholars. And the topic, what he is going to discuss here is, it's about 4 bishops who visited Kerala, who were witness to the second visit of Vasco da Gama in early 16th century, and the recounts of the Portuguese advent based on the documents in Syriac, Malayalam, and Portuguese language. And this is a very unique one in terms of its, it's an uncharted terrain kind of thing, which we have, which is completely unheard in our history writing. So, this will be this perhaps be the first attempt exploring the non-European accounts, by a scholar who is into, István Perczel is into exploration and digitization of rare manuscripts of St. Thomas Christians of Kerala. He is into that for the last almost 2 decades. Professor István Perczel is otherwise professor of medieval studies at Central European University, and he is partly with Mahatma Gandhi University, serving as chair professor at Mar Chrysostom Chair since 2023. I invite Professor István Perczel for his talk on theology, magic, and anti-colonial resistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I am very much honored by this invitation, and thank the Kerala History Museum, the Mar Chrysostom Chair, where I am kind of visitor, but the soul of the Mar Chrysostom Chair, this is Professor Elias. And I am very much moved. Yes, I am very much moved by your interest. And I just told my friend Susan Thomas, with whom we have worked for many, many years by now, I think for 2 decades by now, on trying to document the history of the Christian community. And before I start my talk, of course I have to see not to talk too long. Before I start my talk, I want to say some general words about how I see the place of the work we are doing. Because we started with trying to digitize the Syrian Christian archives here, and my very narrow aim was just to document this and find, because there are thousands of manuscripts, so this will be a source for Syriac studies and the Indian Syriac culture. I would have never expected that we would find what we have found. Whatever we wanted to find, we found partly, such as the manuscripts, such as the texts condemned at the Synod of Diamper, which were not burnt, in fact. But there is a huge amount of historical information that we found, and it is not only relevant for the Christian community. what I found is precisely what Professor Venkateswaran and Professor Ilyas were speaking about, this incredible openness of the southwest part of India, which was deeply immersed in a network in a longue durée network connecting it to Southeast Asia, to China, to the Mediterranean, to the Persian Gulf. And this is a cultural heritage which we need, I think, more than ever in a time when people are thinking in the stupid terms of clash of civilizations. The very history of Kerala shows that this doesn't make sense. There was one, so to say, world system which was working, and all kinds of actors were coming and going and trying to take advantage of the commerce or fighting each other and so on. But there is a long-standing structure. Now, what I will present here is just a little segment from the history of this structure. And another thing is we are speaking very much about post-colonial studies. And everybody knows that this is a very difficult issue. How do we marginalize Europe as Deepesh Chakrabarty has formulated the program? It's not an easy thing, and most of all, Deepesh Chakrabarty also accepted that what we are using for marginalizing Europe are the methodologies that were elaborated in Europe, the historical methodologies. And I very much believe in these historical methodologies, but I think one of the ways of marginalizing Europe is to go to the archives and to see what is preserved here, and not in the Foreign Office of the not in the archives of the Foreign, not only what is preserved in the Vatican and in the Foreign Office of the archives of the British Library. If we see these sources together, which, for example, in this case, which I will present, have never been seen together, then we arrive to new conclusions. But too long introduction, let me start. Here in the background, yes, and what I'm presenting is published material. So if you want to know more, just go to this article, which is of open access in Entangled Religions. Just if you type either my name or Sharanya Chandran's name or Muttuchira, you will find it. And a very important venue is here, the Church of Kadamattam. Its importance you will see in what follows. Okay. How do I move like this? Okay. One of the most important sources about not only the history of local Christianity in India, but about the arrival of the Portuguese. The first non-European source about the arrival of the Portuguese is this text, which was published, let me see, in the 18th century by Assemani, and there is no good new publication of this text, no critical edition. So one of the tasks would be to make the critical edition and new translation based on the 4 extant manuscripts of this text. Because all the texts which we have lacunae, and only based on the 4 manuscripts we can reconstruct what is there in this text. This is the narrative of a certain Rabban Brahim or Abraham of Beit Slok, today Kirkuk, which is titled The History of the Blessed Indians and on their arrival in the city of Gazarta the Beit Zabdai. Gazarta the Beit Zabdai is a city on the Euphrates where was the see of the patriarch of the Church of the East, or Nestorian Church, and this is about the arrival of these blessed Indians, that is to say, 2 persons from India, which happened apparently, I wrote allegedly because there was a debate about the date, but I believe the date is correct, in 1489 or 90. That is to say, 8 years before Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route to India. The 2 blessed Indians who came, they were sent by the local community to renew a lost connection with the Mother Church. One was called Joseph, and he was a deacon, and later he was known as Joseph the Indian because he was the first member of this Indian Christian community who visited Europe. In 1500, when Pedro Álvares Cabral led the second expedition, Portuguese expedition here, he asked to be admitted to his ship, together with his brother, who I think he was called Stephen, who died on the way to Europe. So Joseph arrived alone, and they were the first from this community to visit Europe. He went to Lisbon, he went to Rome, he went to the court of the French king, and finally he returned. And I think that he was one of the prominent members of the community, so they sent him, because they had to pay for the trip to Europe, they sent him to explore who these newcomers are. So there are the documents, because he was interrogated in Europe, and Father Anthony Vallavantara, that was his doctoral dissertation, which he published, the narratives of Joseph the Indian. So this was a major source for information for the Europeans. But although we don't have the documents, it must have been the major source of information about Europe to the Indians. And this Joseph, who was apparently a prominent person, 10 years earlier visited Gazarta the Beit Zabdai. Apparently he was sent because he spoke languages. So in Gazarta he had to speak Syriac, and when he went to Europe he learned Portuguese while on the ship. So he could converse in Portuguese because the trip lasted 6 months. And during 6 months he learned Portuguese, and then he was interrogated, and we have the documents of this. The other prominent person was George, or Givargis in Syriac, whom I identified as George Pakalomattam. So he was apparently the first archdeacon, the leader of the community. So he was not going to Europe with Joseph because he had an important role at home. And so it's long. These are all debated questions. The archdeaconate is dated to the 4th century traditionally, but apparently it originated in 1490, which doesn't mean that there was no role of a leader, but it was not called the archdeacon. Although the letter is written on behalf of 4 bishops, it's clear who is the author. It's one of the bishops who was called Mar Denha. And this Mar Denha will be the main hero of today's presentation. Why we know that it was him? Because while he calls the other bishops who are coming, Mar so-and-so, Mar Yabalaha, Mar Jacob, Mar Thoma, but he calls himself Denkha, the stranger. So this is the humble way of speaking about oneself. And the letter, which I will not translate here, which comes after the introduction, narrates how the Zamorin of Calicut, Coricod, incited by his Muslim allies, massacred the Portuguese colony left by Pedro Álvares Cabral in Calicut, and how the survivors fled to the King of Cochin, and how finally the allied forces of the King of Cochin and the Portuguese defeated the Zamorin. It's a very positive account about the Portuguese, and it considers them Christian brothers, and also speaks about the kind way in which these Portuguese treated those Nestorian bishops, and how they allowed them to celebrate their liturgy. So apparently that was a moment when there was no confessional opposition between these Middle Eastern bishops and the Portuguese newcomers. Apparently they didn't have priests there, or if they had priests, they were not very prominent. Yes, it was published in 1725, and ever since there is no better edition. So I am now reading my own translation, which is based on 3 manuscripts out of the 4, because I couldn't have access until now to the most important of them. Sorry. Now in the year 1801, according to Alexander, which corresponds to 1489-90 AD, 3 Christian faithful men had come from the faraway lands of India to Mar Shemon, Catholicos Patriarch of the East. This is Mar Shemon IV. So that they may take with them fathers, and this is in Syriac Abahata, and this term will be important, to their lands. According to the will of the Creator, one of them passed away on the way. It was a very dangerous trip, and it lasted something like, 10 months. To arrive safely to the Mar Catholicos. Mar it's an honorary title of a bishop. The Mar Catholicos was in the city of Gazart at Beit Zabdai, which is in an island on the river of the Euphrates, and he rejoiced upon them with great and abundant joy. One of them was called George. I think he was George Pakalomattam, the other Joseph. The Mar Catholicos ordained both as priests in the Holy Church of St. George of Gazarta because they were learned men. He sent the 2 of them to the holy monastery of the blessed Mar Augen. All chronicles, local chronicles, which these Christians had, and also the Portuguese, speak about a long gap between in the contacts with the Church of the East, the Mother Church, the Persian Church. Some say it's 100 years. It may be an exaggeration, but for sure, for decades, there was no contact between the Mother Church. And apparently what they write is that because no bishops were coming, no priests were consecrated, the old priests died out and there were no priests. So there remained only one deacon, that was apparently Joseph, who had to serve the liturgy, the Kurbana, because there was no priest celebrating. And apparently the contact depended, and we have a lot of documents about this, on the financial situation of the community. So they could establish the contact because it did not mean only to go to the Middle East, but it also meant bringing incredible amount of gifts. So we have the list from another secret mission to the Chaldean Patriarch from 1786. I found per chance, these are Malayalam documents, which speak about tons of teak wood, pepper, iron, whatever, which they brought in gifts as gifts to the patriarch. In exchange, they got the spiritual help of the coming of the bishops. They took from there 2 monks who were namesakes, both being called Rabban Joseph. The Mar Catholicos consecrated both as bishops in the Church of St. George. He called one of them Mar Thomas and the other Mar John. He wrote for them wonderful open recommendation letters, as well as closed and sealed documents, dismissed them with prayers and blessings, and sent them, together with the Indians, to the lands of India. With the help of our Lord Christ, all 4 of them arrived there safely. The faithful rejoiced with immense joy upon their arrival, and came to their encounter merrily with the gospel, the cross, censer, and lamps, and led them in great procession with psalms and thanksgiving. They consecrated altars and ordained many priests, as since a long time they, the Indian Christians, were without fathers. Again, Abahata. The Bishop Mar John stayed in India, while his companion Mar Thomas, after a short time, returned to the Catholicos and brought to him gifts, offerings, and a slave. There was very widespread slavery in India, yes, you may know. It is less well known that the Christian churches were also keeping slaves. And we have slave agreements even from the 17th century, but this is another story. One should also know that the bishop who is coming from the Middle East is not simply an administrator. As can be seen from many documents, which I cannot analyze here now, the bishop's role was to teach Syriac language and culture. And the priestly families sent their children as young as 12, 13, 14 years old to study, because priesthood was also a hereditary rank or role or task, and the bishop was absolutely needed not only for consecrating the deacons and the priests, but also for teaching them the Syriac culture. So this was also a renewal of Syriac culture just 8 years before the Portuguese arrived. It happened so, it's still the same story. It happened so that before Mar Thomas was to return to India, Mar Shimon Catholicos died and departed from this temporal and passing life to the lasting and unending life in the year 1813 of the Greeks. That corresponds to 1501 AD, and was buried in the monastery of the blessed Mar Abhanmar. May our Lord give rest to his soul in the mansions of the kingdom. Amen. He was succeeded by Mar Yabalaha Catholicos Patriarch, who also took 3 virtuous monks from the monastery of Mar Abhanmar. One of them was Rabban David the Tall, whom he made a metropolitan, calling him Mar Yabalaha. The second was called Rabban George, whom he made a bishop in the name Mar Denha, and he will be our most important protagonist. The third was called Rabban Masud, whom he also made a bishop and called him Mar Jacob. And the aforementioned Mar Thomas, the bishop of India, he consecrated a metropolitan. This is not in the edited text of Assemani, but it is a very important information that Mar Thomas was the eldest bishop after Mar John and was consecrated metropolitan. All of them he ordained in the monastery of Mar John the Egyptian, the blood brother of the holy Mar Acha, which is at the borderland of Gazarta of Zabdai, in the year 1814 of the Greeks, that is 1502-3 AD. He sent all these 4 fathers, Abahata, to the land of India and to the islands of the seas that are between Dabaj, Sin, and Masin. Now, Dabaj, this is normally Java. Sin, this is normally India, and we don't know what, China, and we don't know what Masin, which is Maha Sina, Great China is. It can be Indochina, or it can be the northern part of China. It's clear that at that time there were no congregations in Java, Dabaj, China, and Indochina. All the 4 bishops came to India. But this was a traditional title, which we find first in a writing of Abdisho of Nisibis from the beginning of the 14th century. This is the first attestation of this title, and at that time, most probably, those congregations still existed. It speaks about a contemporary situation, beginning of the 14th century. But the title remained traditional, and this was the title. So they are the bishops of the whole Indian Ocean. But they came only to India. In the succor of their Lord Christ, all 4 of them reached and arrived there in peace and calm. And they met the Indian Bishop Mar John safe and sound. He and all the blessed faithful there were greatly rejoicing upon the arrival of the fathers, Abahata. After 1 year, they sent a letter to the Catholicos Marelaya. However, before the arrival of the letter, the Catholicos Marelaya had died and was buried in the church of Meskanta of Mosul. He was succeeded by the Catholicos Patriarch Mar Shemon. The letter that the aforementioned fathers sent from India contained what follows, and I am not analyzing the letter here. There is another note in a manuscript in Paris, which is clarifying much about this same story. The note was written by the third one mentioned here in this story, Mar Jacob. Mar Jacob, when he already became Bishop of Kollam after the arrival. Again, what I am telling to you is the final results of a research. If you look into the literature, you will find all kinds of things. The manuscript is a Chaldean breviary that belonged to Mar Chandi Parambil, Dom Alexandre de Campos, who was Catholic bishop between 1663 and 1684. He was the first indigenous Catholic bishop who was consecrated due to the Dutch conquest because the Jesuits were ousted and there could be no European bishop here. So in order to keep the diocese within the Catholic fold, they consecrated Mar Chandi Parambil. And that was not followed after that. They were very keen on consecrating all these European bishops. And it was Mar Chandi who copied this note by Mar Jacob in his own hand. So this is his handwriting. Here is the translation of this note. There were other translations. And to the Lord be glory. This book was written, because this is taken from a colophon of a book, which is not the book in which this note can be found. This book was written in the year 1815 of the Greeks. That lasted from September 1503 to April 1504. In the hands of the foreigner Jacob. O world reader, you should know that in the aforementioned year, we reached these lands of India at the city which is called Kananur. There we met true Frankish Christian brothers, who are also called Portuguese. They rejoiced because of us with great joy. You should also know that in the year 1813, that is to say 2 years before, on the 1st of Elul, which corresponds to September, our common father Mar Shemon, Catholicos of the East, left this world of sorrows. Then the fathers gathered in front of our father, the glorious Metropolitan John, and consecrated Mar Elia as Catholicos Patriarch for the Eastern Sea. Then our father Mar Elia consecrated bishops for India, Mar Yabalaha and Mar Thomas to be metropolitans, as well as Mar Denha and me, the feeble Jacob, to be bishops, in the holy monastery of Mar John the Egyptian, which is next to Gazart of Zabdai. You may see that these data perfectly corroborate what we read in Rabban Brahim's narrative about the arrival of the blessed Indians. And we see that there are two main bishops, Mar Yabalaha and Mar Thomas, they are metropolitan bishops, and two minor bishops, Mar Denha and Mar Jacob. Now, the big question is, what happened to these bishops after they arrived in India? And their scholarship is divided, and there are all kinds of views which I think we were able to clarify in this publication. We need also another testimony, this time Portuguese, by João de Barros in Décadas da Ásia, the third volume, published in 1563. And here is my translation. A few years before we entered in India, the Armenian Patriarch sent 4 bishops, so that they may divide the land among them, as there were many Christians there. This Armenian is a standard misunderstanding of the missionaries for Syrian, for East Syrian, or Church of the East Patriarch, Catholicos, out of whom 2 died at their arrival. They, that is the remaining 2, divided the land in 2 parts. The younger one received Kollam, down to Cape Comorin, and the older one resided in Kranganur. This one, as he was a virtuous man, stopped the aforementioned tyranny of baptizing for money. They are complaining, the Portuguese missionaries, that the local priests were accepting money for the baptism. And Nuno da Cunha, when he became governor, was all time favoring him for the virtue that he found in him. In fact, he was much inclined toward the sacerdotal order and the church rites according to our Roman custom. Who was this older bishop? Because he doesn't name him, and there was the idea that that was Mar Jacob, about whom we know that he was very favorable to the Portuguese. And this is what Georg Schurhammer wrote in 1934, and this is repeated in 1963, and this is repeated almost in all the literature. Basically, I didn't find anything else. Mar John, whom the 4 others found still alive in 1503, seems to have died soon after that date. 2 of the newcomers, Mar Yabalaha and Mar Denha, died soon after their arrival in India. Mar Thoma, the third one, we find about 1518 giving testimony about the traditions of his church, and in 1536 we hear that he had helped little, had taught heresies, but that he had now repented, had publicly gone to confession and communion, and called the Franciscans. So Schurhammer and the literature following him thinks that Mar Jacob was from the outset metropolitan of Kranganur. And he thinks that Mar Thoma was the third one, about whom certain Portuguese documents write that he held little, had taught heresies, but then had now repented. I think all this is erroneous. Because in 1536, or sometime at that time, Mar Jacob has become the metropolitan of Kranganur, and because Mar Thoma had to be the metropolitan of Kranganur before, this bishop who held little cannot be him, and he's not named as Mar Thoma. It's a conclusion. And as we will see, Mar Denha did not die after he came, but rather he was the most active bishop among the 3 surviving. because two died. This means that Mar John died, who was old and who was here earlier. Mar Yabalaha apparently died, so there remained three bishops. Mar Thoma, who was the senior bishop, because he was a metropolitan, Mar Denha, and Mar Jacob. Mar Thoma, who was consecrated metropolitan, as we have seen, both in Rabban Brahim's history and Mar Jacob's note, ruled the diocese of Kodungallur. That was the traditional see of the metropolitans of India. And he was, according to Barros, the virtuous man who stopped the aforementioned tyranny of baptizing for money, and whom Nuno da Cunha, when he became governor, was all-time favoring for the virtue that he found in him, and who was much inclined toward the sacerdotal order and the church rites according to our Roman custom. So it is here that we should identify Mar Thoma. If it's a bit boring, all these details, you will see that it is all important to find the role of Mar Denha. And Mar Jacob, whom Schurhammer thinks was the metropolitan of Kodungallur, in fact became the bishop of Kollam. In his note, he signs, I am writing it from Kollam. And also he signs his first Portuguese letter addressed to King John III of Portugal in 1524 in this way. Jacome abuna sacerdote Armenio, que rege aus Christaus na India que dizem de Kullam. Abuna Jacob, the Armenian bishop who rules over the Christians in India who are called those of Kollam. So here we have identified Mar Thoma and Mar Jacob. Mar Thoma in Kranganur and Mar Jacob in Kollam. But what happened to Mar Denha? For this, we have to switch from the Syriac and Portuguese documents to a Malayalam document written in the Watarutu script. Because there is this Watarutu inscription in Muttuchira, which was found in 1929, and for which there were several decipherings. But these decipherings somehow didn't make sense. So the main work of Sharanya Chandran, my student, she is now doing her PhD in Vienna, and myself was to decipher this inscription. We started it in 2020 when I was hosted very hospitably by Sri Shankara University, and we tried to do something with photos which we had and so on that we couldn't get through, and then we decided to make a new estampage. And then came the COVID, and then I had to leave. I left with the last but one plane which was still flying to Europe, and Sharanya was stuck here. Although she was admitted to our university, she couldn't come. She couldn't get a visa, and there were no flights and whatever. So she could come only by the end of the second year of her MA studies, which she did online. And when the COVID was over, then Sharanya could go to Muttuchira and make this estampage, which you see, and this rendered the text legible. So what comes now is our deciphering. This is in modern Malayalam script, but according to the old Malayalam spelling. You will find this in the online publication, and I don't break your ears by my horrible Malayalam pronunciation. And here is our English translation. In the year 1528, from the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ, at this place, by the order of the Lord, Mar Tana, that is Denkha, the Mar Avu, that is Mar Abba. You remember Abahata, All time they were called the fathers. So the Mar Abba, the Lord Father, Mar means Lord, together with Kivarikit, that is to say Givargis, Pirati, which should be Padiri, erected a holy cross. After that, they, that is Mar Denha and Givargis, and his nephew Mattai Padiri, went to the Portuguese land. It was thought that they visited Portugal, but we don't know about this visit. Portuguese must mean that they went to the land which was dominated by the Portuguese, because Muttuchira, where this cross was erected by Mar Denha in 1528, that is to say 25 years after he arrived in India, they left for that land. Muttuchira was outside the Portuguese-dominated land. And these differences were very important at that time. And we have seen that Mar Thoma was in Kanganur. That was a Portuguese-dominated land. Mar Jacob was in Kollam. It was all sea area. It was dominated by the Portuguese. They had a fortress in Kanganur, and they had a fortress in Kollam. They had a place in Kollam. Okay, that's about the cross. It's very important because it shows that Mar Denha in 1528 was alive, that he was erected a cross in Muttuchira, which, as you will see, became the center of the anti-Portuguese resistance, or one of the centers. In the year 1580, from the birth of Christ, on the 13th of the month of Kanni, which is here identified according to new counting with the European months. On the feast of the Holy Cross, the Bishop Maru Chemaon, that is to say Shemon, and Yakov Padiri took this wooden cross, raised it on wood, and erected it. In the same year, from the birth of Christ, at the feast of 18, and this should be December, they placed this bleeding cross. In the year 1581, from the birth of Christ, the 24th of the month of Minam, on Holy Friday, they erected a cross on this basement. So this is all about the successive erection of crosses. We learn a lot of things from this, among others, that basically the granite crosses that you can see throughout, the old granite crosses that you can see throughout in the landscape of Kerala, must date from this time, that is to say late 16th century. What they erected before that were wooden crosses. A little piece of explanation, I already did it. Mar Tana de Mar Avu, this is Mar Denha de Mar Abba. Kivarikit Piradis Givargis Padiri, that is to say George Pakalomattam, the Archdeacon of Mar Denha. On the 13th of the month of Kanni, on the Feast of the Holy Cross, this shows that this was the Nestorian tradition, because the Nestorians celebrated on the Feast of the Holy Cross on the 13th of the month of September, while the Catholic celebration is on the 14th, and everybody has adopted it now. Maru Chemaon is Mar Shimaon, a Nestorian metropolitan who came to Kerala in 1576, was deported to Rome by the Portuguese in 1584, where he died in 1599. The Portuguese did not tolerate the Middle Eastern bishops here. Yakov Padiri is Jacob Nadakkal, whom Mar Shemon appointed his archdeacon and who animated the anti-colonial Nestorian resistance. Archdeacon Jacob died in 1593. And at the feast of 18, only 18, but it should be December, they placed this bleeding cross. 18th of December is the Catholic feast of the expectation of the Holy Virgin and the Portuguese feast of the bleeding cross of Mylapore. And the bleeding cross is nothing else than this, the Muttuchira copy of the Persian cross in Mylapore. It is unclear whether it was brought to Muttuchira from somewhere else or was made in the time of Mar Shemon and Jacob Nadakkal. Everywhere, in 8 places, 7 places in Kerala and 1 in Goa, we have these imitations of the Mylapore Persian cross, which is another story to tell. More testimonies to Mar Denha, who did not die so early. In the second Portuguese letter of Mar Jacob, dated 1530, still written from Kollam, Mar Jacob describes a perilous overland journey from Kollam to Kranganur, leading through hostile territory inhabited by Christians who do not want to join the Roman customs. This is obviously the diocese governed by Mar Denha. So Mar Denha has chosen, he is very positive in the letter that he wrote in 1504, but apparently he changed his mind when he understood that the Portuguese wanted to impose a new culture, so to say, and new rules of faith. And he apparently chose, because he was the second eldest among the three bishops, he apparently chose the hilly area in between Kranganur and Kollam, because that was the most appropriate for the resistance. And this became the custom. So, Kadamattam, Muttuchira, Kotamangalam were the places where these resistant people were staying. A Catholic chronicle in Malayalam, recently discovered by our student Annie Marin Joy, a research scholar at Central European University, Vienna, from the Mannanam CMI archives, is titled On the Arrival of the Chaldean Priest, Denkha, and the Beginning of the Schism. Kaladaya Karan, Denha, Pattakaran de Varavum, Sismayude, Arabhavum. Sorry. This text narrates the beginning of the anti-colonial resistance of the local Christians. It is significant that this began in the hilly area outside the Cochin Kingdom. And our, basically, I think last document is another manuscript, Malayalam manuscript, this time in modern Malayalam, from the fantastic Mannanam library, which contains a chronicle. These Christians used to write chronicles always beginning with Saint Thomas coming to Malankara and finishing with the praise of the bishop on whose behalf the chronicle is written. And this is a little fragment from this Malayalam chronicle, which was written by the end of the 18th century, or beginning of the 19th. A few years later, 2 or 4 persons who studied at depth the books of the devils came from abroad to Malankara. These are our bishops about whom we were speaking. Their names were known as Mar Abhanmar. You remember Mar Abba, Abahata, the fathers, and so the Lord fathers here gets a Malayalam plural ending. Mar Abhanmar, one of these who was called Mar Denha, that is Mar Denha, a sorcerer, Kshudrakan, that is Kshudrakaran, taught sorcery to a priest from the Porvieduttu family, Paulos Porvieduttu, in Kadamattam, here is Kadamuttam. The 2 of them, by the help of the devils, wrought many miracles. At that time, the sorcerer called Mar Denha died. His disciple, the Kadamattam priest, Kadamattattukaram Padiri, took the bones of the sorcerer whose name was Mar Denha and placed them in the southern wall of the Kadamattam church. He made him a god, Devamakivachu, offered him burnt offerings, homam, worship, puja, festive food offerings, Gósamai Yittulla Uttu, and he showed many wonders and miracles. By sorcery he caught the devils and conquered them. On those who stood against them, befell many sorts of calamities and dangers. So this is the famous Kadamattattu Kattanar, about whom there was a television series and who is in the Jacobite fairy tales and so on. But he, in this way, we can date him. He's a historical person. He was apparently the disciple of Mar Denha, who has brought together with the Nestorian theology, that was the first in the title, also Nestorian magic. And those magical texts were condemned at the Synod of Diaper and were believed to be lost, and we found them. So there is a soothsaying text, which we found in, I think, 7 or 8 copies, both in Syriac original and Malayalam translation. And there is a little fragment for a much despised by the Portuguese book, which was called the Persian Medicine, and at least we found a fragment from it. And when I say we, it's our team, but it was, in fact, it was found by a student who is now admitted to the doctoral program, Teres Patteri. So, what kind of information is this? It is certainly, the chronicle is very hostile, because it was written against the Mar Thomas and wants to connect the Mar Thomas to Mar Denha and the Kadamattattu Kattanar. This is my last slide, basically. The bones of Mar Denha were found in 1990 in the wall of the Kadamattam church, but apparently not in the southern, but in the northern wall of the church. There are some other sources which speak about the northern wall. And the following inscription in Syriac and Malayalam commemorates the event. So allow me to read it in Syriac. Garmao kadishe de kashisho me kasho de kadamattam dautech, it's incorrect Syriac, dautech min horcho be yum kadmoyo dirach addar bashnat Olaf Teshmeo Teshin de Moran Simin Horcho. That is, the holy relics of the Venerable Kadamattam priest, which were taken from here, that is, which were found here, on the first day of the month of Adar, that is March, in the year 1990 of our Lord, are placed here, and in Malayalam, 1990, first of the month of March, the holy relics of the Venerable Father. There was no more place to write the same thing. So this shows that we have fairly precise information in our sources, be they friendly to our protagonists or hostile about their fate, and this fate can be reconstructed. It is very clear that out of the 3 surviving bishops, 2 have chosen, on the one hand, 2 were in the coastal area and have chosen to collaborate with the Portuguese, while the 3rd one, Mar Denha, in order to preserve the Syrian traditions, the Syriac traditions, chose the hilly area and started a kind of resistance, which was then followed by his successor, Mar Abhanmar, whose story is much better known. That was it. And I am very happy to answer your questions or objections, notes, so on.
Here, Michael Tarakan. I want to add two more points to what you have already said. One is the economic reasons why the people of what I would broadly call the central Kerala region or the central Travancore region fought with the Portuguese interests because the Portuguese tried to impose their heavy marketing techniques, so to say, over the Syrian traders, including a 12-year. They would fix the price over the next 12 years. Now, this was impossible for the people on the coastal region to break out of, because the Portuguese created their colonial interests backed by a fort, a port, and a factory. And all over the coast you can see that, and the power at its zenith in Kodungalur and Kollam and Kochi and also in further up. So the Christians of the bazaars or the Christians of the coast were forced to accept that, while the Christians inside, in fact, they use two indicators. I don't exactly, not able to tell you the exact document in which it is mentioned, but what I remember is that Angamali is mentioned as one. Beyond Angamali, it is the land of the Christians of Serra, who are not acceptable to the Portuguese interest, because they have the option of taking their pepper and other spices across the mountains to the Tamil country and sell it. So that must have added to the sorcery, Nestorian sorcery and anti-colonial feelings which Denha, Mar Denha might have created in this area. Second point is that you talked about Kadamattam. Again, I am talking from memory, but in Niranam documents, it is mentioned that Kadamattagare Malaka Pidutam. He calls sorcery as Malaka Pidutam. Malaka Pidutam was taught by the same Bawa from the Middle East who came, and another family, Tevelakara in Kollam. Tevelakara people have been taught the science of eyesight, and they're eye doctors. They've been taught this by the same
By Mar Denha.
the same.
He doesn't name Mar Denha.
He must have done. They don't use the name.
Mm-hmm.
They say that the same Bawa taught them. Or it could be, this 3 or 4 bishops who came. There may be.
It can only be Mar Denha.
Pardon?
The others were very peaceful.
No,
it can only be Mar Denha.
No, I'm not talking him. This is also a very peaceful thing, teaching somebody to settle your eyesight.
Yeah. That could be Mar Jacob, because he was in Kollam.
Yeah. And of course, it is also said that, because Tevelakara, in a recent paper presented by Josuguti Abraham, he mentions that Tevelakara family used to keep the Terisapalli Shasana.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very, very, very interesting.
Yes.
A similar thing happens centuries later when the Vartamana Pustakam, the original copy, is kept by the Parayil Tharagan's family. So this, you see this leaders of the community holding important documents.
Thank you. This is fantastic addition, and you mentioned this when we met last time. This economic reason, this perfectly fits the picture, and I am so happy that you added this.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you for the. May I, please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So thank you for the lectures. So I have a few points to a few queries. First of all, when you talk about Kadamatam, we have a belief that there is another priest, as Sir has already said, Tevalakara. We have Mar Abo. We have a person over there. Means we have a tradition of name which is called as Mar Abo, who was a teacher of Kadamatta Kattanar. So he is entombed in Tevalakara. So Kadamatta Kattana was not able to participate in his funeral. So when we went there, he took the relics from the tomb and placed in the southern wall of the Madbaha of Kadamattam
I
Church.
see.
Yeah, so we have a Persian cross, as you had already shown in the wall of Kadamattam. There we have written in Pahlavi language. We have written. So there is many historians in the recent times they have written that inside that cross we have the tomb, we have the relics of Mar Abo. Now, regarding who is this Abo, we only know the name Abo. There are two sayings about this Abo. One, in the Ito writer's book, he is saying that there are two bishops visited Mar Sabur and Mar Afroth in 1829 AD. So one among them, that most probably Mar Afroth is entombed in Tevalakara. That is one tradition. In the second tradition, there in Malayalam we'll say Derakar. That means monk. Simply, monk came with Mar Denha, is entombed in Tevalakara, and he might be the teacher of Kadamatta Kattanar. There are two traditions. So any one of them is there, and Kadamatta Kattanar has taken the relics from there and placed in the southern wall of Kadamattam Church. That is how a tradition. It's not a historical, but a saying. We can say it as a saying, and many local historians has also quoted that. That is the first thing. And the second thing, you show a tomb image, that last photo. That image was that tomb was found not from the wall of the church, but that was only a floor only. In 1998 or 7, I'm not remembering actually. I'm anyhow the last years of 1990s, when the church was renovating, they opened the marble, so they found the tomb. When they excavated, it was frankincense placed, and the skeleton was also found along with the priestly vestments. So the Kadamattam Church recently renovation was done in the Kadamattam Church, and they are proclaiming that it is a tomb of Kadamatta Kattanar, which is the Kadamattam Padri, which you have said. So that is one tradition. And there is one more character. He is actually the Marthoma the Ninth, who is in the history of the Malankara Church, successor of Marthoma Eighth. He was the last one from the Pakalomattam family. He is entombed in there, and it is also said that Marthoma Ninth is entombed in the Kadamattam Church. So I just need a clarification that whether that tomb was found from the exact place and they rearranged the skeleton and retombed it there, or the bones were taken from the wall and entombed it there. So I just wish to have.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I was always intrigued by the fact that the place is the northern wall. So the sources say he was entombed in the southern wall, Mar Denha, but this was found, at least that plaque is at the northern wall. So I was perplexed, and now you have clarified it that I was wrong. It's not Mar Denha because those bones were not found in the wall, but in the
Floor. Yeah.
So thank you. I will correct this.
Yes, and we have.
But can you write me about all these things? This is all new to me.
Sure, sir. Sure, definitely.
And it's very important addition to what I was presenting.
Definitely.
And shows that once again the European doesn't understand.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sir. But we still have a belief that we have a few bones inside the Persian cross in the southern part of the altar. We have a cross, and inside that cross we have the relics. We don't know whose release is that, but still the walls have not yet opened. Last month we have the new church was renovated. It was blessed last month, so I was being there. So the bone was found from the not from the wall but from the floor, and we have a Persian cross inside the matbaha, I mean, or the altar in the southern side of the altar.
I see. I see. Of course, the Persian cross that I was showing was that of Muttuchira.
Yeah.
But there is another one in Kadamatta.
Yeah. Yes, I'm having the photos. I can share you with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Which is which already doesn't reproduce the Persian, right?
But we have engravings of Pahlavi
Yeah, yeah.
languages.
It is not anymore.
Yeah,
It's
we still have
It's
them.
an imitation.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay. So good. So this is very interesting. It is a very interesting. We will publish a correction. There are several elements in this article
Sure, sir, sure.
which needs to be corrected, and because it's online,
Exactly.
we cannot change the article, but we can publish corrections. So
Sure, sir.
it is most welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
But can you write me about this, so, because I may forget. Professor Tarakan, you spoke about the Niranam Grandavari.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just a moment. He has been waiting, and after that, a certain.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. My name is George John, and it was a magical lecture, and thank you very much. I'm
Thank you.
fascinated. Professor Perczel, I have perhaps 2 or 3 prongs in my inquiry. Could you elaborate on the theology and the so-called magic, how they intersected in the worldview of the early 16th century, of the Syriac bishops that you've been elucidating on? Were their rituals and practices later misinterpreted by the colonial narratives as superstitions or heresy? That's one aspect I'd like you to explore. The other is, again, in the context of colonialism. How did the theological framework and liturgical practices of these bishops interact or conflict with the Latinization efforts of the Portuguese missionaries? Is there evidence of theological resistance encoded in the Syriac texts that you studied of that period? And lastly, I know it's disparate, I just made a note of. Could you comment on how ecclesiology of these Syriac bishops differed from that of the Roman model, especially on how it adapted to indigenous South Indian religious and social contexts? I find that fascinating. You're the most knowledgeable man about this that I've come across. Thank you very much for your lecture, and I'd like to, if permits, come and talk to you at your university. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I have 3 questions about magic and its role, about theology, and about the ecclesiology. Did I understand well? Yes. Okay. Magic. This is a very appropriate question, and thank you so much. Because the question is how this comes. Apparently, this Mar Denha was a very learned monk. All these monks were called Rabban, which means teachers, before they became bishops. And as I told, from all the documents we know, that the role of the bishop who was dispatched here to India was not only to administer, but also to teach. So only very learned monks were coming. They were choosing among the most learned whom they had. So this Mar Denha was very much learned. And we know both from the Portuguese condemnatory documents and also from the texts that we have found during this digitization endeavor that the soothsaying and magical healing as the superstitious things which were condemned by the Portuguese were practiced by the priests. So it was their role. And apparently, so what this was the science of their times. Of course, the soothsaying is difficult to say. There was what we found are documents of what is called Kanketu Vidya. That is blind soothsaying. There was a square with 49 Syriac numbers, and the one whose future had to be foretold got a bandage on his eyes, and then the priest led him to this square, and he had to put his finger blindly on one of them, and for everyone was a description what this means. And it was the way they were foretelling the future. This was a very primitive one. But we found something, here I can say I found something more sophisticated, an astronomical treatise which can be very clearly dated to between 1500, I think, 76, but I may be wrong, and 1599. It's an astronomical treatise in Syriac which clearly uses the Jesuit knowledge. And because it is based also on the report of Alessandro Valignano, which he sent from Japan in 1576, so we know that this is the terminus postquem. And we know that the terminus antequem is 1599 because this is the time when this book was condemned at Diamper. And this is the original manuscript which the Portuguese confiscated. They kept it in their library. The library was inherited by the Carmelites, and it was in Mar Abhanmar when Claudius Buchanan in 1806 came and stole it, and now it is in Cambridge. Luckily, he has stolen this manuscript because we have it now, and that gives astrological predictions. That's why it was condemned. But at the same time, it contains extremely interesting geographical data, which are already based on the Jesuit lore, and its astronomical part is it gives the distance of the moon and the earth in parasangs, in Persian parasangs, but if you calculate it, it's the precise distance and things like that. And this was connected to soothsaying. So soothsaying is part of the science. And the other thing, the Persian medicine is very interesting because it contains prayers which should be said and readings concerning certain illnesses, but they didn't find it enough, so there is in Malayalam, in Garshuni Malayalam, there is an edition which says instructions for using the Persian medicine. And the instructions are Ayurvedic recipes. So it was a combination of this so-called Persian magic and Ayurvedic medical science. So what is condemned here, rightly or wrongly, is their science. And this is why it's so important that the Tevalekara family learned from one of those Syrian bishops healing the eyes. So you see also in this astronomical treatise how the local astronomical science, which is enriched by the contribution of the Jesuits, who were very good astronomers, how it is incorporated in the traditional lore. So this is my first answer. Condemning is easy. But for example, this treatise, which I found in the Cambridge Library, this treatise is a fantastic testimony to the confluence, to the way the local Christian erudites were digesting the new information received from the Jesuits and inserted in their own traditional lore. And so it could have been more productive if there were no coming down so strictly at time. And theology. So the question is, in what sense their theology differed from the Western one? That would be a very long story. It's very complicated. What I understand is that there were no real theological matters at stake. It was economy, it was influence, it was the question where the pepper trade is going, whether it goes to the Persian Gulf, whether it goes to the Mediterranean, to the Atlantic, to Lisbon, whether it goes across the Ghats and be sold in Tamil Nadu, and the theology which was somehow become much stricter at the Council of Trent in the mid 16th century. So whatever they found different, they condemned. And we have very interesting documents of adaptation. That is to say, how to keep our traditional theology while accepting the imposed Latin theology. There is a curse of Mar Abhanmar on Nestorius, where he says, we are happy to profess everything as the Roman Church orders, according to their innovation. But our tradition was also good.
My point was, did it contribute to disruption of the colonial, or was it help the continuation of it?
So what did contribute?
The theological aspects of
for the Jesuits, it was
did the theological framework and the liturgical practices of these bishops, did they interact or conflict?
They conflicted and
with the Latinization.
They conflicted and interacted because there was a very able Jesuit missionary, Francisco Rose, who became the first archbishop. He was he was very good in Malayalam, and he was a perfect Syriacist. And he is, as it turns out, one of the most prolific authors who wrote in Syriac in the late 16th, early 17th century. He was a genius. And he elaborated the new Catholic rite with the help of his local disciples. One of them was Kadavil Chandi Kattanar, or Alexandros Neminaya in Syria, Alexander of the Port, or Alexander of the Riverside, Kadavil, and he was a very able poet who wrote Syriac poetry. And Rose, he re-elaborated Rose's prose texts and put them in verse, in traditional Syriac meter, but sometimes imitating the Latin litanies. And Rose included them in the liturgy. So he elaborated a new liturgy, which was then forgotten more or less. It was standardized. But we have the manuscripts of this original liturgy with astonishing things. For example, there is a homily about Saint Thomas, which was written by Rose in Syria. And another PhD student of mine, Radu Mustafa, in his MA thesis, edited and translated and explained this homily. But then, when I was studying that Paris manuscript, which belonged to Mar Chandi Parambi, there I found a poem for the feast day of Saint Thomas, July 3rd, which was based on this homily. And it was written by Kadari Chandi. So they included this poem. First Rose wrote the homily, and it was versified by Kadavil Chandi. It was included in the liturgy. So it was a very fertile encounter, in fact, and Rose was very much loved. There is a beautiful, now we are publishing it, there is a beautiful acrostic poem by Kadavil Chandi, which he wrote after the death of Rose, a panegyric, and he writes very beautiful things about Rose. For example, he writes that he was a humble man, he was very knowledgeable, and he lived among us as if he were one of us. And we called him the blonde Thomas, because he was blonde, he was Catalonian. So he was very much loved. But what happened was, after Rose, there came much less gifted Catholic archbishops who were oppressing the people. And one of the complaints which they presented, I don't remember the date, to the Portuguese viceroy before the Cunan's revolt, one of the complaints was that instead of making Kadavil Chandi, who was the best disciple of Rose, the Syriac teacher of Vaipikotta, they sent stupid Europeans who didn't know Syriac. And they even tried to teach Syriac to the people who knew already better Syriac because they were the pupils of Rose. So there was also this clash between a local intellectual elite and the Europeans who were not always, Rose was at that level, and he has a dream, he had that dream to create a local hierarchy with local bishops, local erudition at the level of Europe, but also using all the local traditions. But this was not continued after Rose. And that was one of the main reasons which led to the Cunan Kurishusatyam. They were very dissatisfied with the way the successors of Rose were treating them. And the third is ecclesiology. The important thing was to cut this Middle Eastern allegiance and impose what was called the patroado. The patroado meant that only the Portuguese king could nominate the bishops. And this was based on a papal charter. Later, of course, when the Dutch conquered India, it became obsolete, and then there was a big fight, even between Rome and the Portuguese crown, because Rome wanted to nominate directly. At the same time, the local Christians, and Professor Tarakan knows it very well because it's his family tradition, they wanted the Chaldean allegiance. And this ended only with Kyriakos Chavara by the end of the 19th century. We have a lot of documents about the secret communication between the Chaldean Patriarchate and the local Christians. It did not stop. Yes.
Hello, sir. My name is Arun. Actually, I wanted to add a bit more on the Kadamatam. Initially, the gentleman explained. So there is this inscription mentions Mar Abhanmar on it, and it was actually translated in 1920. Later on, it was published in Travancore Archaeological Series, Volume 6. So it has a bit on the how this inscription was made, and probably it is mentioned that it is a bit correct. There is errors. Probably it is copied from somewhere else, probably Muttuchira. So that is a kind of inferences there.
Actually, I didn't understand. So there is an other copy of this inscription.
Yeah, it is mentioned in that one.
I would be very much interested. So it's not T.K. Joseph's publication.
No, this one is by Travancore Archaeological Series, Volume 6.
Volume 6?
Yeah, 1924.
1924?
Yeah, later. Okay, probably.
1924, because I read T.K. Joseph's publications. He and Henry Hosten tried to read this, but apparently they didn't have the correct estampage. So for this inscription, there have been already decipherings, but I think the new estampage permits a better reading. And there were all kinds of fantasist readings. For example, Hosten said that Mar Abbo should be a certain Ambrose. And so on and so on. So this is not the first reading of this text, but I wonder whether there was another in the Travancore Archaeological Review. I think in the Travancore in the Travancore Archaeological Review it is Ramanatha Iyer.
Yes.
Ramanatha Iyer published it first, and he did not translate, but he gave the content, and apparently he was working on the same estampage as T.K. Joseph.
Yeah. So
and so there are several errors in these readings. We try to correct this.
okay, sir. So apparently, when I looked into it, he was actually helped to one of the Parsi in Bombay. So Ramanatha Iyer, he was helped by a Parsi who knew Pahlavi. He's the one who actually provided the information to Iyer, because Iyer asked him to translate for him.
Yeah, but there is no Pahlavi here. The Pahlavi is in the column copper plates.
I didn't get you, sir. I didn't understand.
So please, could you write me about this? And
yeah, sure, sir.
Then we could clarify, because now I don't clearly get it.
Sure, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
That was it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you for all these contributions. You have proven at many points that I was wrong, and I'm very happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you, István, for a wonderful lecture. And I think these sessions are like increasingly building a lot of curiosities around history. I think, a landscape like Kerala. So it's an honor, I think, and we could again engage with you, and we hope to, continue our, conversations in the future, and hope that you will be, doing another lecture in around the time of in December, as we thought maybe we'll be, coming back with some more information. Thanks a lot for such a curious audience, and we hope to get in touch with you for our upcoming lectures and exhibition projects. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, and it was really an honor for me, and also very, 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 very useful. Thank you so much.